Well, I think I figured out a way to make a metal drive belt for this radio. I went to the hardware store looking for something, and this is what I found. Piece of 1/4 inch. It's a .016 by 1/4 inch brass, and it says it's shapeable metal shapes. So I'm hoping it'll take the bending going around those. It'll last for a while anyway. So now how to figure out where to drill the holes in it, right? For the screw and the pin on the pin on the dial. So I set it. I took some thread. This is all I got. I wish I had some bigger round diameter stuff, but this is what I got to work with. And I made a belt. And I marked it here. Let's get in there and see if we can see this a little better, what I've done. So I tied a loop, made a loop, and then I threaded it through, and then to hold the tension, I pulled it. To hold the tension, I used these to pinch and hold it while I tied the knot. So it's got a little bit of tension on it, so when I turn this handle, it actually turns the dial. And I made it so that it's just right when it's all the way open. It's right at the edge of, it's at the perfect spot, right? Because it's still holding it flat, and it's not going to bend the part coming this way. It's not going to bend it this way. So as so it stays flat against the pulley. And the other direction, when I turn it around, you'll see the pin come around. You'll see the pin come around. There's the pin, right? And the pin's right at the edge where it's gonna come out of the hole of the drive belt, and I marked it there. And I marked it there. So now I have that distance where those two holes need to be drilled. So what I can do now is cut this and lay it out on that brass and mark the holes. I'm hoping that'll work. And then once I get the holes drilled in it, I can put it on here, and I'll have a length, because where I cut it, right? Where I cut it is the length, and I'll have to cut it a little bit more and drill holes for I got a couple of springs. I got a couple of choices. These were the smallest springs they had there at the hardware store. So this one might be a little bit long, but I can always cut it and then remake a loop. So I can make this one as short as I want. This one's a little bit stronger. This one's a little bit bigger around and it's shorter, but it's weaker. It pulls apart easier, so it won't put as much tension on it. I'm gonna decide which one to use when I get to that point. And I think I'm gonna be able to do this. I don't think it's gonna be that difficult now that I have where the holes are marked. Where the holes are marked. And it does not matter where the needle is right now, because once I get the drive belt on, this needle slips on that shaft. So I can just slip this so it sits in the right spot when the gang is either fully open or fully closed. It doesn't matter. But it'll sit, because this moves 180 degrees and this moves 180 degrees. So I think that's pretty much the synopsis. We'll see how it goes. I'll take some more video of when I get it laid out onto when I get the string laid out onto the copper brass, and if my marks are easy to see. I don't know, it's hard to see right now because the pulley is so dark, it's hard to see. And this one down here too, because the screw is covering it. I had to unscrew that screw and get in there with a marker and mark it. It was not easy, but it's not that difficult, It took me like, this whole setup here took me about 15-20 minutes. So I think this might be the best way to make the metal drive belt. Like I said, once I get it once I get it on here, I'll be able to mark the brass as to how long it needs depending on how tall I make that spring. And then I'll drill the holes in it at that point for the springs. All right. Until next time, until I get to the next step here. Okay, I've been working on the drive belt for the dial. I have it pretty much figured out. I just got greedy, and I'll explain. This material is just way too thick to be the drive belt, but it works good as a pattern. And I was able to use the piece of string when I marked it with the with the marker to transfer where the holes go. And if you look, this hole's not in the center of the band. And if you look at this collar, the hole's not in the center of the collar either. It's off to one side just a bit. So it's off center to one side. So I was able to bend this around the pulleys to make sure that the distance between the holes is correct, so that the dial, so when you turn the dial, when you turn the tuning gang fully open, this screw will be let's turn this where we can see it. Raise this up just a little bit so that the screw will be just to the point where the dial belt will be pulling up on the screw, right? So it's still sitting flat on the pulley. I was able to bend it around too so that this hole, this is really starting to, so that this hole was in the right position, so that when it's full, when the gang is fully open, it's all the way around the back side of its travel and just about ready to start coming out of the hole, but the belt is still laying pretty much on the driven pulley or dial pulley on both sides of the hole. So that this hole, the upper hole, travels 180 degrees, right? Perfectly. So when the gang is fully closed, the screws around the backside and the band is still laying flat under the screw, and the pin is just about pardon me, just about ready to come out of the hole, but laying flat on both sides still. The belt's still contacting the driven pulley or dial pulley on both sides. So I know the distance was right, but I left this a little bit long because I didn't know how much room I needed in between. I left it a little bit long. Because I didn't know how long it needed to be. And since this doesn't flex enough to actually use it as a dial band, all I could do is make sure that the holes were the right distance apart. So what I ended up using is a 1/4 inch Stanley tape measure. This stuff flexes very well. It's designed to flex, right? And it's got a good coating on it so it won't rust. So I had this made perfectly. Let's turn it around. I had it made perfectly. I had it on there, and I was able to turn the band back and forth, and the holes are in the right position. So I marked it, and I cut it to length, and then I went to drill the holes for the spring, and I got greedy on with the drill, and it split out. I don't know if you can really, if that really shows up in there very well, but it split out. The hole split out. So now I got to redo all of this, but it's not that hard. The good thing is I've got 10 feet of this because I cut the tape measure. So I've got 10 feet to mess around with this. I will get it. So what I'm going to do now, when I remake this, I'm going to have it long on both ends. I'm going to, because this is the right length, I will mark the new tape measure where it needs, where the holes need to be for the spring, but I'll leave it long, and I'll drill all 4 holes at once. and then I will trim this to fit and put it on with the spring. That should be the last time I have to make this. It's not that hard to do. It's just frustrating and really tedious. The good thing is it's metal, and I know how to work with metal pretty well. Dial strings, not so much. This thread's pretty small, but dial strings themselves, I'm lucky I haven't had to do one yet, and I'm gonna try and keep it that way if I can. But if I have to do it, I know I can. It's just I don't want to. I really don't want to mess with the dial string if I don't have to. So, yeah, well, there we are. I'll come back when I get it done and it's installed. And I think I'm going to leave the paint on this. I was thinking about taking the paint off. So if somebody ever opened the radio up, they're, what the heck, you know, seeing a tape measure as the drive band. But this is a very good protective coating on this, and it will protect it. I mean, it's just not going to come off by flexing, so I really don't see a reason to remove the paint that they put on this. It's just going to work. It's going to work good, and nobody's ever going to see it unless they take it apart. So I think this is going to be a solid repair. I think this is going to be I think this is going to work. My only fear is that the spring tension is not enough to keep the drive belt from rubbing on this. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see, to keep it from rubbing on this right here as it goes up to the driven pulley. It comes awful close to this weld mount right here, or this mount for the clock, or for the dial. Something else that comes close to, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a screw in there. There's like a panhead screw in there. There's a panhead screw right there, and the head sticks just a bit proud, and the belt kind of seems to want to rub on that. But since this is held on with the set screw, and this moves back and forth just a bit, right? So I can put this all the way out, and I think it's going to clear no problem once I get it installed. But once it's in there, you know, if I get this spaced properly, this will keep this in line with this. So depending on where I set the set screw. And from the pictures that we looked at before, the original material was a bit skinnier than the 1/4 inch that this is. I'm not sure how wide the material was that they used, but this is just a sliver short of a 1/4 of an inch. This is right on a 1/4 of an inch. I will be able to remake this, no problem. So I've talked enough. Until I get the drive belt made and installed, I don't think there's any real reason to show me drilling holes and cutting this. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The hardest part, in my opinion, was, pardon me, was figuring out where these holes needed to be in relation to the driven pulley and the drive pulley. The driven pulley, dial pulley. The drive pulley, pardon me, which would be the tuning gang pulley. The tuning knob pulley, whatever you want to call it. Because this is just an indicator. Right, until next time. Well, you can see I got the drive belt made. I might modify it. Like I said, I got 10 feet to make another one. I don't know if I want to drill more holes in this stuff. It's not easy to drill because it wants to tear. But you see when it's all the way, tuning condenser is fully closed. I could have cut this. Or drilled the hole here, right? So it's closer to the shaft, and then cut it right at the bottom of that hole. That would give me more spring tension. A little bit more spring tension. You could see it could be a little bit tighter. I don't know how much further I could stretch that. That spring used to be these pieces of spring right here. You're not going to stay, are you? So they were not Let's move them a little bit further so they're in the center of the shot. See if we could telescope in on them. Of course, it's not going to make it easy, is it? Okay, so I had to cut this. The first piece was this plus the piece that's on the piece that's on the dial, and when I put it together, it just didn't have enough tension. So I had to cut this section off of the piece I had already made. It wasn't easy to do, but it wasn't super difficult. The hardest part is getting it wide enough to get the cutters down in there. I didn't dare use my flush cuts. I don't want to screw up the jaws on my flush cut. I don't know how. This is spring steel. It's pretty hard. It did not completely dent these, but it did make some marks in them. I don't know if it's going to show up here. You can see it made some marks in them. You can see it made a couple of marks here. It didn't dent the jaws, but it kind of deformed the metal. Just, I don't know. I could tell where I cut them. But, you know, I had to cut it twice. So, now we'll look at how the dial band. We'll get the dial band back into the shot here. I'll have to raise this up just a little bit. I'll get this cord out of the way. So you can see when the screw comes around, it's right at the edge of where it would be starting to pull on the. It's right on the edge where it would start to be pulling on the belt. Now on the back side, I don't know if it's going to show. You can see the pin is. The pin is just starting to come out of the drive belt. It could possibly slip, maybe. If I had this to do over, I'd move that hole a little bit further up. I'd probably put it more where the into that number 4 there a little more. I think I'd probably try and put it up into that number 4 there a little bit better. As you can see, when that comes around, that pin goes right in that hole. We'll turn it around this way. And then when the tuning condenser is fully closed, see there's a little bit more room. That could have come this way more where that 4 is. You can see it could be a little bit further this way. But I think I did pretty good for not having a pattern. I think if I had to redo this, like I said, I got 10 feet, I might. We'll see. But this seems to work okay. It is just touching down here. It is just touching down here just a little tiny bit, but not much. And it's rubbing on that screw, and I don't want to move it this further out any further. I don't think would be a good idea. Because every time I turn it, it wants to move back. It just works its way back into here. I'd have to take this apart and make a spacer to keep this out. And it's not really rubbing hard down here. It's not making any noise. I don't know if you can see that very well. Try and put a little extra light on it down in there. So you can kind of see that screw. You can see that screw down in there. But they've got the jaw of the screw, the slot in the screw, sorry, not the jaw, but the slot of the screw right in line so it can run in there without rubbing. There's plenty of room in there for it to move around. I don't know. Let's see if we can change the angle on that so you can see it. Yeah, like right in there. Oh, you still can't. Can I get the light up in there? Yeah, there. You can see it inside that screw, that mounting screw for the but there's room for it to move around in there. It's not really rubbing. It's close to rubbing on the weld mount for the dial. And it's hard to see there, I know. Let's see if we can get it up. I'm going to need that flashlight now. So you can see it's almost rubbing on that. It's just touching it there. Just touching it there. I think it's going to be okay. I should have probably made it out of something else other than tape measure. Should have made it out of something other than tape measure. But it's the only material that I could come up with to make it out of. And it was suggested to me by, what is that? What is that noise? I had not heard that before. Oh, I see. It's the set screw is a little bit long that holds this ring on, so it doesn't really push on this tight. And when it's coming around on the back side, it's just... See, it doesn't do it every time. It's actually, Sarah, it's sliding on the threads. The band is sliding on the threads. And I don't think I could have gotten this hole in a different spot, because it's really close to 180 degrees out on this shaft. It's very close to 180 degrees out as it goes. And if we look at the dial face, we get a better shot of that dial face there. And as we turn it, I know I'm not right in line. Let's see if we can get right in line with it here with the camera. Try and get really in line with it if we can. So it goes exactly 180 degrees. I really don't think I could have done that any better. So I might call this good. I don't know, this radio isn't worth a whole lot, you know. I don't know how many of these they made. It's not like it's a super rare radio, you know. It's the Indian head radio, I guess is what they call it. So I've seen it referred to as the Indian head radio. But it does work. It does work. And it does feel good to make something like this, you know. It does feel good to make something like that, you know. You just got to think about things and what sort of materials you have on hand to make it. I guess I could have contacted one of the companies that make the dial bands, I guess, for the old Atwater Kents and for the old RCA, like the 17s and 18s. I guess they use a metal drive belt. A lot of the radios from the early 30s, late 20s use the metal drive belt. And I guess there's guys out there making them, but they don't make one for this that I could find. But I could have probably contacted them and got some of the material they make it out of and then just fabricated one. But I thought this, it was suggested to me by, God, I can't think, Mark something. I had contacted him. He deals in old radio parts. I can't remember the name of the company. I'm gonna have to. I'll put a link in there to it in the video description. I'll put a link to his website. He does a lot of old radio parts for people, you know. So if you need a rare part for your radio, he may have it. I will put a link to his website on in this description, in the description for this video. So I think I've talked enough. I think the next thing to do is to. I got the capacitors replaced, so I think we're heading on putting the tubes back in and doing an alignment. I think I'm going to lube this mechanism up here a little bit, and I might clean the contacts underneath here. Let's see if we can stand this up on edge, and I'll move the camera. Let's see if we can get that in shot. You can see there's a set of contacts right there. See if we can telescope in on that a little bit better. Yeah, there's a set of contacts right there. See them? I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit. It looks a little dirty, but on the tuning condenser right here, there's a set of contacts. I'm going to try and clean that up a little bit. I don't know what I'm supposed to clean it with, but I'm using electrical contact cleaner. It looks like somebody had put some grease on it maybe, or some sort of lubricant. There's looks to be some sort of lubricant on there. I'm going to try and clean it up a little bit. It doesn't make any noise when you turn it when I had it running before, but I haven't tried this radio since I replaced all of the capacitors. Since we replaced all the capacitors, I haven't tried this radio, so I think I'll do that. We'll do that last here real quick. We'll just turn it on. So I'll get set up for that real quick, and then we'll, I guess I have to put the tubes back in. Am I ready to put the tubes back in? I think I am. I think I am ready to put the tubes back in. I think the last thing we'll do is go ahead and turn this on and see if the dial is okay, right? Or maybe I'll wait for the alignment. Yeah, let's wait for the alignment. We'll make a little separate video on the alignment and putting it back into the case and running it again. Alright, until next time. I wasn't happy with how the belt was sitting on there. It was rubbing just a little bit down here. Now there's a gap in there. It's not rubbing now. I can get that behind there a little bit. Maybe I get something thinner in there. The tip of the screwdriver is a little bit thinner. See how I can get back there just a little tiny bit now? There's like a fraction of a millimeter where it's not touching this now. And there's also a lot more room in here on that screw, where that screw is. It's not rubbing there at all. I like how the belt is, there's almost no looseness to it. It's pretty taut. So what I ended up doing is cutting it off and re-drilling the hole. And here's the piece I cut off of it. See if I can get it to stay on the screwdriver. Probably not. But I just cut a little piece of it off and re-drilled the hole on this end, like where I had marked it with the marker is right where I drilled that hole, and then I cut it right where I said I would, right at the bottom of the hole. It was a lot harder to put the spring on this time, but it looks a lot better. And then on this side, when you bring it around, let's see if I can tighten up on this a little bit more. So when you bring this around, the pin doesn't fall out all the way. See, it's staying in the belt better. There's no way the belt can slip on it now. So overall, I had the holes drilled in the right spot. I didn't need to move it. It's right where it should be. Right where it needed to be. It's right where it needed to be. So I'm pretty happy with the way it is now. It runs pretty good. No complaints. So I'm going to call that repaired. The only fear I have now is that the spring's not going to hold up because it's stretched so far. Because you know I had to redo this one end. So the spring tension might eventually straighten this leg out a little bit. We'll see how it lasts. It looks like there's plenty of it wrapped around on the back side there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's possible. it is a definite possibility it could get, you know, this could straighten out. I don't think I could make it go in there any further. Because I think it's, you know, it's going to go to the apex of that. Yeah, it is what it is. I don't think there's any change in that. This end down here looks like it's really good, you know. I think it's going to last. If nothing else, I'll have to remake the spring in the future. I've got plenty of spring. I don't know what I do with the other piece. I still have quite a bit of spring left. I can make more. I can make more spring. What did I do with it? I just had it just a second ago. That is so weird. There it is. So I got plenty of spring left. I can make quite a bit more if need be. I could probably make 2, maybe 3 more springs out of that if need be. So I'm going to call it a repair, a solid repair. It looks a little funny being a piece of tape measure. But it works. I don't think I could ask for more. Thanks for watching.